Yeah.
Well, I've heard and read a lot about radical grassroots democracy in Rojava, but I gotta wonder, how does that play out, like in terms of strategic decisions and unit technical decisions? Does that enter into it at all?
No, not whatsoever. He asked if the sort of grassroots democracy element of Rojava plays out in the military in any way, in a military way, which is no, it doesn't. The military organization like YPG are run along totally different lines. It's like really strict hierarchy. Not really strict. I mean, it's less strict than like I think most modern armies. But like you have commanders. You listen to them. You get in trouble if you don't. It's not. We don't take votes on shit. I mean, there are like every night. You talk about. You have a meeting. You discuss what happened during that day, and like if you have to take blame for anything, or you have to talk to somebody about something they did, you can do it there, which is pretty cool. But that's just like a regular old fucking mouth struggle session. That's not like you don't vote on anything at the end of it. You vote on punishments, which is kind of tight.
Okay.
If you're popular, you can convince people not to get you in trouble.
I had heard that they elect their commanders.
No, they don't.
Bullshit.
No. People might say that maybe they did one time, but I never saw anyone elect a commander. You can elect a squad leader, I guess, but like, it sucks to be that. It's like a punishment. You don't want to do that. But no, you don't elect commanders. Which is a good thing. Like, no offense, anarchists, but it's not. I don't think that's how you win. Not that anarchists ever won, but I'm just kidding. Someone else had a question over here? You know what, Melissa?
Yeah, so moving forward now that Rock is liberated, you're kind of saying that, the next biggest hurdle maybe the Syrian war. Like, can you really talk about, like, at least from your perspective as like a YPG veteran, what you see the main struggles or how that could shape out? Just maybe give some more detail.
Okay, she's asking for more detail about what's going to happen now, and what my perspective is as an ex-YPG fighter, about now that Raqqa is finished, what's going to happen with between the YPG and the Syrian government. That fucking shit keeps me up at night, because here's the thing: the Syrian government has won the rest of the country essentially, except for the pockets that Israel keeps protecting near its border and some various other places. But most of the country is free from Daesh or from al-Nusra, and the north has been cleared pretty much, except for the corridor controlled by Turkey. And now it's looking like in Deir ez-Zor, YPG or SDF rather, which is like the kind of, it's like how like fucking RCP and all that shit creates front groups so people won't know who they are. That's like what SDF is for YPG, except there's a lot more like. So they've incorporated a lot of other local groups into it, but it's like a YPG front group. They are sort of going through the same places that the Syrian army are, and there's been some like minor clashes and things of that nature. I worry about that because, first of all, I don't think that the YPG could win against the Syrian government, and second of all, I don't think that they should fight. I think if they did do that, that would be, whether their intention is or isn't, I think that would be doing basically the bidding of NATO and specifically the United States, whose number one goal in Syria, ISIS is a fucking smokescreen for that. America's number one goal has been to get Assad out and to open up a new market for American goods. And to destroy Iran's influence in a country that's like one away from theirs. Which is just fucking ridiculous. That has been America's goal and America's puppets in Israel and in Saudi Arabia. So if the YPG does end up fighting the Syrian government, I think that'll be really bad. And I don't think they'd win. No, I don't think that will happen. I think that there are talks as of a few days ago between senior level commanders of an association that's associated with the YPG that has nothing to do with them. but and in Kamshlo, which is a city in Rojava. I think that some degree of autonomy will probably be granted to the north, and that either the forces will be integrated into the Syrian army, which is what the Rojava constitution actually calls for, is for the YPG and all the armed groups there to be integrated into the Syrian Arab army. I don't think that's actually going to happen, but it might. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, there's been, as we saw in Iraq this week, there's if that happens, I don't think it'll turn out well. You know, obviously the YPG has been much more adept at fighting than the Peshmerga in Iraq have. But I mean, what are you going to fight against tanks and planes? Like, you can't do it. You know, and if America helps, that's no good. I don't know if that answers it.
So you described a lot of factionalism going on in other countries and even within Iraq itself. So where does this all fit in the grand scheme of Kurdish independence?
Okay, so he asked about the factionalism within YPG, or there's not really factionalism within the YPG, but within the greater move, like in Syria and in that region in general amongst these groups, and how that figures in for Kurdish independence. So the answer to that is technically the YPG and PYD and parties that somehow just share the same exact philosophy, like the PKK, they actually aren't calling for Kurdish independence. Sort of in 1999 or 2000, they switched ideologies from sort of orthodox Marxist-Leninism, which is, I'm telling you, is great, to democratic confederalism, which actually calls for them to just be integrated within the greater state, just with a huge degree of autonomy. That's a real big simplification of it, but essentially that's what they're calling for in Rojava. So, like, for instance, when I don't know if you guys have been reading the news lately, but there was an independence referendum in Kurdistan, in Iraqi Kurdistan. That wasn't done by any of the parties involved in this. That was done by the KDP, which is the Barzani's party, who are not good. It's like fucking gangsters. Not the cool kind, like shitty kind. Like meth selling kind, not like bootlegging kind. Not that they sell anyway, I don't know. But so Kurdish independence, like the PKK didn't support that. They didn't come out against it, but they didn't say like, we are fully behind this, because that referendum in particular was a power grab. However, the masses of Kurdish people do want independence, as well I think they should. So they kind of went along with it because, I mean, as former Maoists, you gotta go with the fucking mass line, you gotta go with the people. I think that is on the mind of a lot of people. Like, I met quite a few people who were torn, who accepted this new ideology, but still were really attached to the idea of a Kurdish nation, which I don't think there's anything wrong with. And I think that'll end up being the case in some places. I think just the material reality of living in Turkey for them, or for Abdullah Öcalan, caused him to think like, okay, well, maybe we should do this democratic confederalism thing too. But I think in the case of Rojava, I think it'll be more of an autonomous area, rather than, or it will be, it won't be its own sort of nation state. I mean, their whole thing is too that they're against nation states in general. But I think if it came down to it, I mean, you'd probably say yes. I would say yes. Fuck. I don't know if that answers it at all.
Can you say something about the influence of Murray Bookchin and his ideas on the YPG?
Yeah, okay, so he asked me to say something about the influence of Murray Bookchin and his ideas on the YPG. I'm going to preface this by saying I've read one thing by Murray Bookchin, and Jew to Jew, you know, it's all right. Yeah, so democratic confederalism kind of came out of Murray Bookchin's ideas. He's I don't know if he calls himself an anarchist anymore. I don't think he does. Well, he's dead now.
Well, he's
but,
dead now.
Yeah, Shahid Amrin. He is an anarchist from Vermont, I think. He was like a big, one of those big guys who wear suspenders. You probably got a few of those in Sacramento. A big guy who wears suspenders and kind of like balding white hair. And it's like the same exact thing. I don't really know. I haven't read that much Bookchin, so I can't really compare it. But people I know that have read both say like it's pretty much just like of Murray Bookchin's ideas adapted for the Middle East in particular. I don't know. I can't really speak to that though because I haven't read much. I've read some, but it didn't have to do with confederalism. But it's different, I know, in some ways, but I don't know which way. I couldn't tell you. If you want to tell me after, I'm all ears.
Can you tell us anything about like the way children are being taught about like the history of the region? Because I heard there was like some very like revolutionary ways in which they've like revamped the education system to teach about like patriarchy.
Okay. Yeah, just about education.
Yeah.
I know there's some. Yeah. So he was asking about education there. What they've done is they've totally revamped, I think, higher education. I don't really know that much because I wasn't there, but from what I do know from Red, so it's probably the same shit as you. They've totally redone sort of the way that schools are taught, and not only just teaching Kurdish now in addition to Arabic, but just there's like a different style of teaching, which I couldn't really say. I hate fucking school, so I avoided it. I'm an adult now, so I don't have to go anywhere near it, which I didn't. I was in a couple schools, but there was no one else in them. Sorry. I can talk to you more about that after.
We're gonna take stack actually. Rebecca will like look for because we have multiple ways in the hands. So
Okay.
Rebecca's gonna take stack.
Yeah, go ahead. Fucking Robert's rules, even here.
Yeah.
Well,
We should set up there, Rebecca.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, Ben and then you in the blue shirt. So we'll start with Ben.
Are you? Okay,
Yeah.
alright. So my question is, I don't know very much about democratic federalism. I'm a little familiar with like what democratic centralism is as a model,
Yes.
what dual power is as a model.
yeah.
So I'm wondering how democratic federalism fits. Is it a model in terms of how a transition occurs?
So, yeah.
So I just wanted to learn more about that. What is a fair, good model for federalism?
Okay. So, he was asking about democratic confederalism as opposed to like democratic centralism. But here's the thing: democratic centralism is just a way to organize a party. It's if it's a one-party state, it's kind of how the way you organize a state as well. But Rojava is not. A lot of people think when people talk about it, they just refer to it as like the PYD runs the state. There's actually several parties underneath it. Not underneath it. That sounds bad, but parties that are also in it. And they have a system called TEVDEM, which is Movement for a Democratic Society, which sounds like some fucking college shit you'd see here. It's the way that like they sort of organize their whole society, and it's outside of the party. Like you don't need to be in a party to participate in it, and the party doesn't control everything. So what they do is it's a pretty standard model, like I guess you'd think of. It's sort of like grassroots democracy. They organize it along neighborhood lines or along like small village lines, and you have a council that's made up of progressively stacked with various minorities and is half men, half women, and the co-chairs have to be one man, one woman. And beyond that, and then two of those people are elected to a higher body, which is, I don't know, maybe a neighborhood or some collection of small villages, and then onwards and upwards and upwards and upwards and upwards. There are parties in that, like the biggest one being PYD, but there's also like, there's two Kurdish communist parties, there's various ones that are just like for like a Turkmen party, and like there's some various Arab formations that are like specifically for like not minority, but like, for rights for those people. But yeah, so it functions on that level. Economically, it functions totally different. This is where my big criticism comes in, because there aren't really many means of production there, except in Afrin there are, but in the two other, the cantons they called, there aren't really. And there isn't a large industrial base. It was mostly like the northern part of Syria was mostly like used for natural resources before. But what there are is that they organize their people, and this usually comes to the core of party members that do this. They organize into cooperatives and into communes, and then those people sort of function within the market and want to, which is, and with the eventual goal of overtaking any sort of private business, and so it'll all just be like a society basically of producers competing with each other, except that it'll be owned communally. Now I don't know how much that works in practice. I do know that they have formed a trade union, which I've never actually read any articles about, but I know people who work with it. A trade union that is for all workers, like no matter what industry, or I don't even know if you really have to have a job. But it's just basically a mass union that they've started. I had 2 days off total the entire time I was there, and I went to the economics office, but there was like there was the biggest calculator I'd ever seen. But beyond that, I can't read Arabic, so couldn't get much out of it. But I know that there's a lot of there's people particularly in charge of different industries, and then in charge of sort of delegating people to start businesses within those industries where those businesses are owned by all employees or not owned by anyone, everyone just lives there and stuff. Yeah.